Mr. O'Loughlin, welcome back
Hello,
to
sir.
the podcast. How are you?
I'm very well. Actually, no, I'm a bit sick.
Yeah.
I have been sick for the last 2.5 weeks. I was saying on my own podcast, I think I may have COVID or had COVID because it's just fucking dragging on. But I feel better, even though if I don't sound better. And you were also sick?
Well, whatever you had, you gave it to me and my entire
No,
family.
you
so
had it before me.
I did not have it before you.
All right.
You're sick. You're sick the last fucking 3 years, don't you? Every week I have to cancel that. I'm sick.
No. 2.5 weeks, so I've been bad, man.
Okay, well, I hope you get better soon. Me too. Anyway, today's podcast, I think, is I'm excited about this one. Really looking forward to it. We might have slightly missed the boat on it.
I think we did, yeah.
Trying to put it together for fucking weeks, but the Netflix show Adolescence. First thing I will say, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the show, we're going to talk about it in detail here, so don't want to give you any spoilers. If you haven't seen it yet, go and watch it. Initial thoughts on the show?
Well, firstly, I'd be surprised if people haven't at least heard about it.
Yeah.
If they haven't seen it.
It did go wild.
Yeah, it really did. And my initial thoughts were, well, I fell asleep on the third episode. Remember, I was trying to watch it.
I actually fell asleep on the third episode.
I was just exhausted. But yeah, well, actually, John, my initial thoughts actually were I watched the first 2 episodes back to back. And by the way, it was filmed. I didn't realize how emotional I was. I remember turning the TV off. Me and Daniel were going to bed. And I was so hyped. My nervous system was just really stressed. And I didn't realize I was like that watching the 2 episodes. But for me, Jesus, extremely emotional. Particularly that last episode, I'll obviously probably mention what I actually did as soon as it kind of cut to the credits. But yeah, I don't know. As we're going to talk about here, it definitely left a lot of unanswered questions. It didn't really give me any answers, but I really enjoyed it. As difficult as it might have been to watch, or as the questions came up for me. Yeah, I just thought it was really, really enlightening from as a father, particularly, and then obviously looking at society as well. How about you?
Yeah, I think for me, there's 3 elements to this conversation. I think I really enjoyed it as well, by the way. I found it compelling is the word I always use about this show. It was a really compelling.
What does compelling mean?
Compelling. It inspired a lot of thoughts and questions and emotions in me. I was compelled to reflect
sit with them
a little bit. There's 3 elements to this, and I think we'll discuss all 3 today, but that I particularly found interesting. One was the production, which is fucking wild.
Yeah, well, you can give us a bit of insight in that, because has that been done before?
Yeah, it's been done in I don't know how, in a context of this type of a show. Has it been done the way it was done? Like, because a lot of TV shows now are essentially mini movies.
Yeah.
Massive production and massive scale, lots of bodies, lots of tech, lots of production. And the way this was shot, just for clarity for people who may not be aware, which I don't know how you wouldn't be now because it's everywhere, but each episode was shot as a single take. Now, it doesn't mean they only did it once. So they would have rehearsed these single takes, but the scale of it is outrageous. So single take, the episodes are about 45 to 50 minutes long. So it means that they rolled the camera and said action, and they didn't finish that take until the end of the episode. So it was one single take with no cuts, which is just first of all, and I don't have necessarily a background in that type of production, like TV and stuff like that. But from someone who has a small bit of insight in the production world, that is a mammoth undertaking. It is incredible to be able to do that. And a lot of these shows traditionally will be shot over the course of like weeks or months for a single episode, because there's locations and shots and character development and stuff like this, and there's production and reshoots and all these different types of things. To be able to do that and coordinate that, specifically the second episode in the school, there was 400 or 500 people involved in that, in a school, multiple locations, and it was this one continuous dance, this masterpiece. Absolutely incredible production. So from a production point of view, it was really, really impressive. Why I think it added to the story is because when you have like a typical show or TV show or movie or whatever like that, every time the camera cuts away to something else, to either support the show or a different character or a different, it's a break for your brain. It's almost like a little mini reset. And in social media and all this, we actually use this like almost like a pattern interrupter, changing context for people to keep people interested. So you cut away, reset your brain. The more you do that, the more you have to kind of reframe it and re-engage and bring your attention back. When you only have one continuous shot, you don't actually get that break from it. And I realized halfway through episode 1 in the police station, I was like, why am I fucking sweating? I was sweating. I was like, this, I didn't know beforehand. I was like, this is all shot in one shot. It took me like 20 minutes to realize that. And Jill was like, yeah, obviously, because she knew ahead of time. But you don't get a break from the emotion. And it's a particularly emotional show, a lot of the episodes are, and you're just there the whole time. So it feels like you're actually part of it, and it's happening in quote unquote real time. So a minute is a minute, as opposed to like in a normal TV show, it could be shot over, it could be 3 weeks go by in the space of 45 minutes. you're just in it the whole time. And there's really awkward, long silences as there would be in real life. And there's tension that just...
And the constant uncertainty and the unknown. We're following along with them. What the hell's going to happen next?
Exactly.
What's actually happening?
What is going on? You're in the moment, like in that police station at the start. You're like, where are we? What's going on? And you can almost imagine that's what it feels like to be in a situation like that. So from a production point of view and the building of tension, because as I said, there's no cuts, there's no break from the tension. So it just constantly builds and you've no chance to resolve it in your head and kind of just get a little breather from it and go again. It cuts to something lighter, as it usually would do to keep you interested. This doesn't do that. So like from a production point of view, that was the first bit. I was like, wow, this is really engaging TV. And I think it added nicely to the story they were trying to tell. The second thing I found interesting was my own reaction to the show as a whole. It like you, it invoked a lot of emotion in me. We'll discuss this. It opened up some doors for me. It asked me some questions, like we're going to talk about, where there were necessarily no answers. It made me feel uncomfortable in certain spaces. It made me feel frustrated in certain places. And I found my reaction to the show really interesting. And then the third thing I found interesting was a week or two after it was released, the global response to this show. That's the third thing. I was like, wow, Jesus Christ. And like some of it I found really bizarre and weird. Some of it I found just pure.
And it may be going to policy in the UK.
This whole idea of like government using this as an educational piece for school and maybe implementing it in curriculum in the UK. I don't know how to discuss it here, but in the UK. And yeah, just the overall reaction to this. One, as a cinematic piece. Two, as something that potentially is going to inform policy. Three, as your
own reaction, your own personal.
People have an emotional reactions, pushback from certain groups. You mentioned there's certain groups, social groups pushing back against this or open up dialogue and commentary around what does it mean and what is it and what's the story. So I found that. So from the production, my reaction, and society as a whole's reaction, I just thought like that's what was compelling to me. It's like, agree or disagree with any of this, it stirred a pot.
Yeah.
I got a lot of people buzzing around us. So I think that's an effective piece of TV.
Yeah. And then your man, what's his name?
Stephen Graham.
Yeah, he's brilliant as an actor and then clearly as a director. Like,
top class.
Because would he have wrote that as well? Or like, you know, what's how much of it is involved?
I will not comment because I don't know. I imagine himself and he had writers. I imagine they wrote it, but I don't know. But
then he's the director of that and then acting as the dad. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, phenomenal.
As a piece.
So we won't bang on too much about the production. From my perspective, the production, incredible, absolutely incredible. Hats off to the whole team. Everybody was involved and it was absolutely a masterpiece. And how they pulled it off. If you haven't watched any of the behind the scenes stuff and how they did some of these shots, it's beautiful. It's phenomenal. There's a couple of shots I was like, I was like, how did they do that? And then to see the behind the scenes, like, wow, that's serious work. So we won't bang on too much about that. What I'm interested in is our reaction to it, our emotion, because we would have talked about this and would have had some similar reactions, and I would have had some, and you would have had some that were a little bit different. And then society's reaction to this. So maybe talk to me first about the emotions this brought up for you.
Yeah, I suppose like I definitely looked at it at the lens of a father, because I was thinking of my children, think of being in the father's role with his son, and then as you mentioned about being in the police station, because no one knows what's going on. And then I think the big thing throughout the whole thing for me was that the son was telling the dad, I didn't do anything. Yeah. There's nothing wrong here. So then he's presuming his innocence. And now he's seeing all these kind of things unfold. But the big thing, I suppose, in the station, what was I got even straight away was that he asked his dad to come in. And the man was like, oh, he's asking you. And then the dad came in. And I think in a lot of situations, I'd say children potentially would ask their fathers, or ideally, because again, moving into the chaos or the uncertainty, potentially you would like a strong man there or someone like that rather than potentially your mother, who would be more obviously nurturing and by the sounds of it had a better relationship with the son than the dad. But I suppose like, especially the first two episodes. Sorry, the first episode, because it was the first episode that we found out that he did it, wasn't it?
Yeah, let's give it just a really quick recap for people. Episode 1, police kick down his door, drag him out of bed, arrest Jamie, the young guy, he's 13 years of age, bring him into the station, and the parents go in, they process him. Man, what an uncomfortable scene. They process him in the station, and they essentially, and again, spoiler alert here, because if you haven't seen it, don't listen to this until you've watched it, but then they bring him into the interrogation room, and they're essentially interviewing him. He maintains his innocence the entire time with his dad. You're kind of with him and the dad a lot of the time throughout this episode, and then essentially they bring him into the interrogation room, and he categorically denies it. You can see Stephen Graham's character, his dad, kind of going, okay, I believe my son, at which point they turn around a laptop and basically show Jamie stabbing his classmate, a 13-year-old girl, in a car park. So it's in episode 1, it's very clear he has done this thing. There's video evidence of this. Episode 2, is the school environment, where the detective in charge of this case goes into the school and starts to interview all of the different people involved in Jamie's life. So he's trying to interview friends, teachers, and the environment is just fucking chaos. The teachers are burnt out and overwhelmed. They have your that male teacher, what was his name? I can't remember his name, who is the representation of most of the teachers in this. He's late for class, his shirt is untucked, he's completely overwhelmed. The kids are all there's no real control. They're kind of messing. They're loud. It's not like a tip. Well,
it's a little bit wild.
Like, it's very wild. Now, I say it's not like it wasn't like the school I went to, but according to a lot of commentary after this, it's quite typical of a lot of schools in the UK and potentially a lot of schools here as well. I don't know because it's been a long time since I've been in school. But just a little bit unruly, no real control, and the teacher just managing the chaos as opposed to educating and leading and anything like that. And that episode is based in the school. And one of Jamie's friends, these two friends, one of his friends in particular, is in some way implicated with this. So it turns out it was his knife, wasn't it? And he knew something that was going on, and everybody kind of had an idea of there was this underground world online that they were involved in. Maybe a bit of online bullying with the girl who was murdered with Jamie, and she was questioning his manhood, and there was this idea of incels, which again we'll discuss in a minute. And it ends up with the police chasing that young fella and having a bit of a confrontation there and finding out that there was something definitely going on deeper here. And a very important scene in that was the son of the detective who was in that school explaining to his dad that you guys are bumbling around, you've no idea what you're looking at here.
We're all laughing at you here.
We're all laughing at you. Not that we're laughing at you, but this is a world you don't understand. It's new. You're looking in the wrong places. This is an online world. There's this hidden language and there's a lot of kind of bullying and insidious stuff going on here. Episode 3, which was fucking Jesus, dark. She is a psychologist, maybe a forensic psychologist or a criminal psychologist, and she sits in the room with Jamie for fucking 45 of the most uncomfortable minutes ever. And you see this dynamic play out between her, who's trying to understand this boy who's done this thing. She's trying to understand his motivations for doing it, and she obviously visits him regularly enough, and they have this dialogue and this conversation, which is this roller coaster of emotions, which essentially ends in Jamie getting really, really angry, and her ending the interview, and there's a huge dynamic sway there between, she goes in as the professional, she's looking at him as a boy, she wants to talk to him, understand. He has this wild expression of anger and then fear and then insecurity and then anger and rage again, and this whole gambit of emotions, and you can actually see her change from the cool, calm professional to a vulnerable woman, to someone who's disgusted by this, to someone who pities him, and she goes through this whole range of emotions, which is really interesting. And then the last episode is essentially the family life, the family Jamie has left behind, which is the mother, the older sister, and Stephen Graham's character, the dad, in what is essentially a normal day, but how they're dealing with this particular situation.
A year on or something, is it?
Is it a year on or 6 months or a year on or something like that? He's going to be tried, but he decides, he rings him, he's going to plead guilty, etc. So it's just the portrayal of the family's perspective of this, and the dad in particular towards the end, how that all works out. So again, just to give you the context for people who might not have watched it like a month ago or whatever, that's how the story played out. So a bunch of different perspectives on this incident.
Even as you explained it there, I could feel the emotion. Holy fuck, there's loads there that's kind of unpack. Because what was the question?
Sorry, back to your question. Yeah. Let's talk about the emotions that come up for you in
again, like I said, I definitely watched it, I suppose, over the whole 4 episodes, ultimately as a father. You know, okay. I for some reason my children were Jamie. You know, I was viewing
Did you get that from the very start when they kicked in the door?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know if literally the very start, but I would definitely say once as it went on, because there was a scene on the first episode where he's getting searched, and they have the camera pointing at the father, and you're just watching him be extremely emotive and be like terrified and sad and extremely vulnerable, going like, my son is being searched here, and he believes at that time as well that he's innocent. So I was putting my child and myself in that situation, going like, fucking hell. And then we're following this, so we don't know at that point what the crack is. So I think from that point onwards, I was really invested in the whole show as a father, and then just the chop and change of it all. Because again, you're questioning whether he did it or not. And then when you find out he did it, because I remember when they showed the video, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, how did he do that? Because he's only a little boy, and look what he's done. And that obviously changed everything. And then the ups and downs and everything that you mentioned with the second, third, fourth episode, there's so much that's going on. Because even that school, I would say the same as well. That school for me wasn't that chaotic. Maybe schools have changed it, but like since we've been in school, but there was definitely an unruliness, this idea of a different world, as in, you know, social media and the internet for these kids. I don't know how true that is. That's a question that you'd say about that in reality. But it's definitely an aspect here of like, you know, us being older and more mature and not being part of a generation and a world that we genuinely don't know what the hell's going on. The psychologist one, like said, the chopping and changing, and then the last episode, man, that last episode, the very last scene. So I'm going through that whole last episode as a father again. The father's doing his very best. Maybe we'll talk about it. Extremely angry, trying to do his best to express it. Obviously, it's a quote unquote normal day, despite all this madness and awfulness that has occurred. But at the very end, man, when he kissed that teddy bear, I don't remember what he said, maybe sorry or something like that. He said,
I'm so sorry, son.
I'm so sorry, son. And he started bawling his eyes out, and the credits came out. I immediately turned to Danielle, and two of us were bawling our eyes out, and we just hugged. Like, and all I was thinking of at that time was like Sailor or Gigi, but I was just thinking that as a parent going, oh my God, like just a quote unquote normal family doing their very best. Look what's happened. And all you can say at the end is, I'm sorry, son. I did my best. I don't know what I'm doing. And we can all relate to that as parents. We're all doing our very, very, very best. And if that happened to any of us, you'd be like, just heartbroken. And Jesus, I haven't bawled at that in a long time.
Why do you think you had such a visceral reaction to that? Because you watched it, you know that he did his best if you watched the show. You know that this was some freak incident that he had no awareness around. You know he didn't beat his child. You know he wasn't an alcoholic. You know he did nothing. Why do you think that particular scene had such an emotional...
I suppose because, again, we're all, particularly as parents, but even just in life in general, we're all moving into uncertainty. Like, the more I lean more into myself in life, the more you realize that nobody has a fucking clue what they're doing. Like, they really don't.
But why did that upset you?
Because, again, the idea that this could potentially happen, no matter how much I show up as the best father, no matter what I do in Sailor or Gigi's life, being the very, very, very best person, and I believe I live even more intentionally than that character or that father did, yet there's still uncertainty. There's no guarantee of anything in life. And just to then have that, if that was me, to kiss that teddy bear because Sailor is gone or in jail and going, I'm so sorry. Like, that's just heartbreaking because it's like, could I have done more? Should I have changed? Why did I do that? But, like, again, he did his very best. What he was doing at the time. And actually, I'd even question he did really well because to go back to the character, he was beaten as the child. He intentionally said, I didn't want to be like my dad. He worked for himself. The business blew up. You kind of see the story. So he was busy, and we talked about it off podcast that maybe emotionally he wasn't there, but he's just doing the very best that he can do. And I think that was just the uncertainty, the potentiality of that, despite doing everything that you can do as best as you can do, you can't protect fucking anybody.
Yeah. I think this is a really good place to bring in just a bit of context from my perspective. I listened recently to William Costello speak with Chris Williamson. I think you listened to that one as well, which is a good episode to listen to. And they did it specifically on this show. And William Costello does a lot of work and research. He's actually an Irish guy. I think he lives over in the States. He does a lot of work around
incels.
I think he does some stuff around intersex dynamics, a lot of young male work, a lot of really research backed work, and I really like him. I really respect this stuff. When I was listening to their conversations, some stuff I found really interesting, really real great food for thought, and some stuff I think missed the point for me. Bless you, excuse you. I think it just missed the point for me, so I'm going to weave that in as we're going, right? So I think first piece of context, I did at no point after watching this show did I have a fear that young boys were going to go out and commit murder because of the internet or social media or loneliness or exclusion. I've never seen that necessarily as a problem, and I still don't after the show. I don't think that was the point of the show. I think that is a dramatization of one of the most extreme things that could potentially happen given a very specific chain of events. But I do think that chain of events impacts young men and young women in many, many, many different ways. Mm-hmm. And I do think that all of the elements outlined in the show, your home life, your school life, your friend life, your romantic life, your access to content and influence online, all of those influence many different areas of our life. So real super clarity around this. There's no part of me that thinks, Jesus, if I'm not really careful now, my son's going to go up to be a murderer. No part of me thinks that. It's that happens absolutely. But what William Costello was saying in this particular episode they were talking about was there was literally no recorded incidences of this incel violence, which the show we were led to believe that through this series of events, him consuming this content, he became this angry murderer. And I think that even misses the point, because when I'm watching it, this was not a premeditated thing. It was all like off the cuff. He got really angry. He was potentially being bullied online. He grabbed his friend's knife, but I don't think he's like, I'm going to go kill this girl and get revenge. He was embarrassed by her in the video. She pushed him. He had an emotional reaction and he lashed out and he ended. None of this was like, okay, I'm online plotting the death of this girl. So I think even the pushback he gave about there's no recorded incel, I don't think it was trying to commentate on this was premeditated incel violence as a result of online exposure. I think this was, as the show clearly portrayed across the whole lot of it, a collection of factors. In this instance, it just so happened that this thing occurred. He murdered a girl, which wasn't, in my opinion, even necessarily premeditated. I know we brought the knife and all that kind of stuff, but it was a reaction, an emotional reaction. What it highlighted for me and why I had the same emotional reactions to you were this young boy is really, really struggling, as most teenagers do, to regulate his emotions, to express an appropriate response to embarrassment or shame or loneliness. And for me, why I got upset at that last scene is because I understood that, God, I can have such an impact on my son's ability to feel a bit better about himself, to learn skills, to better regulate himself. And Stephen Graham's character breaking down was, in my head, me, if I don't generate a little bit more self-awareness around my own emotional control and show my kids that. That's what I saw in Stephen's character there. He was so busy trying to do the right thing that he didn't realize there was another right thing he could have been doing, which was maybe be a little bit more present, and he didn't even know what it was, which is why the scene just before that, him and the wife were sitting in a room going, did we do this? What did we even do? There's no answer. They don't even know what it is. It's not take the phone away. It's not keep him off his laptop. It's none of those things. It's just a collection of things. Is it better modeling from the teachers? Is it better modeling from society and the police? Is it better education? Is it like, I don't know. It doesn't answer any of those. But my reaction to that wasn't, oh my God, all these kids are going to go out and murder girls. It was, Jesus Christ, the raw emotion in these kids. It came out in Stephen Graham when he threw the paint over the fan, when he grabbed that young fella. There's this raw expression of anger. So he obviously never really learned how to control or express his anger in a healthy way. And he's just been guarding his family from it the whole time. But it came out. It came out in his son. It comes out in men all the time. It comes out in me sometimes. And that's why it hit so hard with me. When I saw that, I was like imagining myself having an aggressive, violent outburst because I haven't learned how to regulate my emotions properly. Because that's in there. It's in a 13-year-old boy. It's in a 30-year-old man. It's in a 50-year-old man. It's in all men. And it's in women in a different way. And I think for me, it was all a commentary on if we're not aware of this, not that they're going to go out and murder everybody, but that there's going to be real challenges for our children and younger generations that can be exacerbated by the online community because you fall into these potentially incels who are telling you it's other people's problems. Like the incel, one of the real tenets of the incel community is it's their problem.
Yeah.
It's women. They're the reason why we're not good enough or we're not whatever. It's other people. It's the standards are too high. Whatever the message is. Again, I'm not an expert in incel community. William Costello is, so go listen to him. But yeah, that was for me the message. So when I started hearing all this conversation around, oh my God, we have to stop this before all these, and then the pushback was, no, this is ridiculous. We should not listen to any of this. Like I didn't get that message at all. I had the same emotional reaction when I saw the father kiss the teddy because I could see myself as the father. I could see myself as the son. I could see myself with this anger and rage and upset and embarrassment and not knowing what to do with it. And I'm fully aware over the last few years now of how I've tried to work on that myself. So that was a really long way.
No, but I think it's really good. And maybe we could go into the idea of regulating your emotions. Because I think that is a big part of this. You said to me on podcast or off podcast about Jill using some kind of pressing technique to help people, children specifically. Deep pressure, to regulate their emotions. And I said to you, well, Danielle does that. But Danielle does that in a very unconscious way. Danielle gets the kids and she wraps a blanket around them or she gets them really comfy. And I'm always like, you're mad for doing this now. But actually, she knows unconsciously, as a woman who's in touch with her feelings and can regulate her emotions very well, goes, no, this is helping them regulate their emotions. And funny one for me, because I actually only found out, a big thing to do with regulating your emotions is listening to the same song or watching the same programs over and over again. Because there's familiarity. What's the word? Can't say it.
Familiarity.
There you go. To what you're watching. There's a sameness and a safety with your nervous system. And what did I do last December, Daniel, when I made a professional change? I remember listening to the same song for about a week or two.
What song was it?
I actually don't remember what it's called, but it's a cool remix on YouTube. But Danielle was like, what do you listen to that song for? And I was like, it's a really cool song. But looking back, I was in this uncertainty of my life. I find this song that makes me feel good, makes me feel safe. And what do? Well, I'm going to leverage and use this to regulate my emotions. And just kind of go back to what I think the whole point of what you were saying here is that idea of regulating your emotions. It was evident that the father, not that he was like toxic or he was a bad person, he just doesn't have the tools to regulate his emotions. He was actually quite a successful man. He mentioned at one stage that his business had taken off. So obviously he's working 5, 6, 7 days a week. He's extremely successful. He's being the provider. He's being what he believes a man should be able to do. But I think, as we said off podcast, whilst he was there, maybe emotionally, he wasn't present. Because again, maybe he's just so busy, he's not actually there in the moment when him and his son are together. The idea of the football, I think it was football. His son was playing football and he wasn't very good. And Stephen Graham, again, the father who can't really regulate his emotions, felt that shame. And rather than have the tools to be able to go, I know what this is, I'm going to have a conversation with him and let him teach him how to regulate these emotions, he looked away. And he looked away potentially out of his own shame, not because the shame of his son. And again, this is the idea, we talk about it off podcast, the importance of me and you or any father or mother doing the work to teach your children. It's not about telling them. If we don't genuinely lean into this type of work, they can't learn. Because we said it all the time, you tell your child one thing and you go and do the other thing, they're going to do the other thing. They're literally going to copy you. And that's all it was. Unfortunately, that generation, I think it was 50, they were maybe a little bit like shied away from these vulnerable feelings. They were not allowed to stop and ask these questions. And Jesus, man, we've had conversations on this podcast about our feelings for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. We are hopefully moving out of that and going, look, there's a level of education here. There's a level of understanding here that we can give ourselves the space and the tools to regulate ourselves and ideally teach our kids through our doing to do the exact same. And again, the reason that I got so emotional was that we can still do all that. And it may not be enough. But I do believe it's certainly a hell of a lot more likely that they would have the tools to potentially deal with the difficult emotions or the stressful situations or the things, the uncertainty of life that will definitely pop up for them. So we can't protect our children, but can we give them the tools if we implement the tools to navigate life? What, did I make any sense there?
That was brilliant. Brilliant. Me and Brian before these podcasts, sometimes we reflect on our previous podcast. We're like, because when we finish, we're like, that was fucking chaos. That was outrageous. We listen back and go, oh, that was actually decent. We get some feedback and people are like really enjoying it. We're like, oh, okay. Before this podcast, we're like, is this going to make any sense? That was fucking brilliant. That was I think that hits right to the core of it. You said a couple of pieces there. The shame he felt with the football, that was mirrored. Now, again, let me just put an important bit of context around this. This is art. This series is not a documentary.
It's real.
Art. But why I liked it so much is because good art asks questions and evokes emotion. So we got this from this particular series. They might not have intentionally gone in saying, you know what, we're going to reach out to fathers through this episode and have this real reaction. But that's what we got from it. So our interpretation of this is really important. And that's why I think the bigger conversation around government and all this kind of stuff, which we'll talk about, is ridiculous at the moment because everyone's going to have an interpretation. But what you've just said there encapsulates my interpretation of it brilliantly. Because even when he finds out in episode 1 that Jamie has done this, and Jamie goes, Dad, and goes to touch him, it fucking broke me. I was crying. It broke me because he turns away.
He kind of shirks away.
He's ashamed.
He's afraid. Oh, he's ashamed.
He's ashamed.
Okay.
It's the same when he can't look at his son with the football, when he doesn't answer his son when he says he wants to plead guilty in the last episode. He's ashamed because he feels that responsibility and that weight, even though it was nothing he did. And you can't even blame him for not having the tools to teach his son how to regulate because he came from that generation where these weren't tools. Me and you are sitting here in the very privileged situation of like having access to a lot of these tools.
Yeah.
They're going to look at us like dinosaurs. My kids are going to look at us going, they thought they knew what regulation was. Sitting here drinking coffee, fucking pussing on a podcast, completely dysregulated. And they'd be like super calm.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be a Buddhist and AI is going to be doing all the hard work. So they're going to look at us like fucking dinosaurs. But all of these small little symbols of it's his shame. So when I saw him shirk away from his son, I felt shame and fear and embarrassment. Because what am I doing for my son to help them regulate? I'm not even doing it myself. That's what I felt. I felt that in the last episode when he said, I'm so sorry, son. I felt that when he lost his fucking rag and threw the paint at it. I was like, that's what my son is going to model. I have 2 sons. That's my 2 sons. And my daughter are going to model. They're going to not listen to what I say. They're going to see, can daddy regulate himself? And by me regulating, you have a couple of things they can model off that. I help them co-regulate. Like Jill, you mentioned Jill earlier on with the deep pressure stuff. That's a sensory thing. She's a pediatric occupational therapist.
Is there what's kind of the reasoning behind that?
I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to explain it, but the deep pressure, it's a sensory. So it's a nervous system regulation. It's a physical regulation, like a hug, or like you mentioned as well, like sometimes Danielle will like cradle your head to her chest and stuff like that. And when Jill does that to me, it reminds us of when we were babies and we've been protected by our mothers. That's what from my very basic understanding. It's much deeper, but
it's to kind of bring you to that fight or flight state a bit more, like resting.
You're safe.
Safer.
It's Jordan Peterson's walled garden. You're safe. You feel safe. When my kids are playing, I know that I've created that walled garden for them. They feel safe if they're playing. If they're not playing, they don't feel safe. They're dysregulated. Some people who struggle with sensory issues, they need deep pressure to help them regulate, to help them feel safe. When they feel safe, they can calm, they can organize their thoughts, and they can see things a bit clearer. So it's the same with all of us.
And then dysregulated or unregulated parents leads to a household oftentimes that isn't regulated.
Exactly. So the household, they're not regulated. The household's not regulated. And then you add social media to the fray. And this is where I think it has an appropriate place in the conversation, because we're already dysregulated. So rather than traditionally what we would have done is look to the parents or the family unit or the tribe for how to regulate, and they would have helped us either with hard boundaries. So like men teaching boys that here's a hard boundary, which was healthy and unhealthy in certain ways. So let's just make that very clear. There's a certain element of that. I said on the podcast before, me and Jill talk about it all the time. There are times in my house where Leo and Jason need not that's not physical violence, by the way. It's a hard stop. This is the line. There is no, and they will test that boundary, and that's healthy. But it's also healthy for them to realize there's a limit to that boundary, so they can understand. Okay, I have all this power and all this energy and aggression, and I can scream and shout. That's all fine. Express yourself, but there's a line where if that hurts somebody else, it's a no, and that's how we learn as we grow up as men. I can speak as men. That there are certain things that we are capable of that are not okay to do because it could hurt or upset somebody else. And we need to understand what that is and why we wouldn't do that. There's a whole morality issue around it, whatever. But if you don't have, for example, that, or learn how to regulate yourself, or learn how, like when you feel anxious, what can you do to calm yourself down, or learn that deep pressure feels good, or if you don't learn any of those tools and you're on the internet all the time, the internet, which is literally designed to stimulate, not to regulate, because all you're getting on there is dopamine and stimulation, because it's designed to keep you on the platform.
And often quite emotive as well.
Very emotive. Now, not because Big Bad's tinfoil hat anybody is up there pulling strings. Literally, the apps are designed to keep you on the phone and feed you things that are going to have an emotional reaction, which is the opposite of what you need when you need to be regulated. That is when I can see fuel on the fire. That's why I see this stuff being quite dangerous, not because the incel community or Andrew Tate is going to tell you to go and murder somebody, which is, I want to address that Andrew Tate question now as well, actually. But so you've highlighted that really, really well there. I think the social media problem and the school's problem and the busy father problem is the children are now not learning the skills that they need to regulate in a world which is highly stimulating compared to our parents' generation, where they still didn't have the skills to fucking regulate, but the world was a lot less stimulating. There was a lot less anger and madness and chaos literally being fucking directed into your head. We were sleeping better because this wasn't in your face the whole time. We had a little bit more community because we weren't on this fucking thing the whole time. So that's where I think this comes in. Not that the messages here are going to tell you to go and kill somebody. Because like William Costello had said, these communities that the show is quote unquote blaming, which I don't think it is, by the way, there's no history of violence in them. But for me, that's not the point. It's not about this thing is going to tell you to go and do something violent. It's about this is bringing you from a level where you're already probably struggling as a teenage boy in a hormonal world, and a teenage girl not knowing what the fuck is going on. Your body's changing, hormones
and
changing.
The dynamics of boys and girls and women's social status.
And now you've access to porn, you've access to social media, you've access to just constant stimulation.
And you even mentioned about the idea of bullying. Now, bullying is no longer just in the schoolyard. It's actually following you everywhere, 24/7.
It's in your bedroom. And even that bedroom thing, it's in your bedroom. Stephen Graham's character said he's just in his bedroom. Didn't do anything wrong. Not suggesting that everyone's in their bedroom getting bullied, which leads them to go out and commit murder. No, but you're in your bedroom. You can't escape. You've no safe haven with your family because they don't understand, or with your bedroom because your phone's in there with you, your computer's in there with you. So for me, that's the narrative. And I don't think it gives us any answers to those questions, but it asks that question of the parents. Were you aware of this? This can be a problem. This can exacerbate these issues for these kids. And where are the schools aware of this? Have they got the resources? Absolutely fucking not. They don't have the education or the time or the resources. What's his name? Mr. fucking, can't remember his name.
I don't know his name. 30
kids, wild, dysregulated, all jumped up on Monster, poor nutrition, poor sleep. I'm completely making this up now, but I'm just assuming, like, based off the average child I see now.
Well, I actually remember, God love him, I'm not going to name the teacher, but I remember a geography teacher of ours having to leave school, he burnt himself
Yeah.
out because it was wild and he couldn't control the class.
How could you not? How could, like, I've often said this. I am in such awe of people who can do that as a job at any level, because, man, I struggle to regulate myself a lot of the time, and noise and chaos really bring me to my limit. If you put me in a room where I'm supposed to be the healthy, balanced adult, and like most teachers are in their mid-20s now, I'm in my mid to late 30s now, and I'm still trying to figure out how to regulate myself properly. And you've got 30 kids there who are also all dysregulated, and a third of them have insert lettered diagnoses here, and a third of them are not eating well or sleeping well, and a third of them have access to social media. And you're supposed to be the calming influence, and you're the person they spend most of their day with. Like, I think that second episode displayed that really, really well. I think the third episode showed Jamie's inability to regulate himself in a situation that made him comfortable. It showed it to us right there. Here's how, for me, that was like, here's how that happened with that girl. Because he was calm and cool and calculating. And I've heard people talk about, like, oh, it showed you how much, and actually, sorry, they said this in the podcast about it. I don't be saying this is my quote, but it showed how much of a psychopath he was. I was like, no, that just showed me a normal kid, completely dysregulated.
Well, you said to me off podcast, and maybe you can, it would be a good segue in here, but the idea of like accepting the emotion of what you're feeling, or very shining a light in the emotion, because you mentioned about anger.
Yeah.
And it being like in you, and rather than going, okay, suppress that or repress that or ignore it, no, we actually have to shine light on it. We actually have to accept that this is in me rather than ignore it.
I get very angry sometimes, like rage angry really fast. It's not common, but it's in there.
Damien Brown has talked about this as well. So clearly, because I don't have that same anger, I would have fear. It's very evidently fear for me. I'm not an angry person inside, but you would have that.
So I'm not an angry person, right? And this is what I wanted to clarify, because I said this earlier on as well. It's fear. My anger is fear-based.
Okay.
So us, in general, big generalization, but in my experience as men, I speak to a lot of men, anger is our response to fear. Anger is our way of protecting ourselves to a fear-based response. Somebody challenges us and we respond physically, generally. That's a generalization there. From a lot of women I would speak to, anger is expressed differently. It could be withdrawal. It's different protective mechanisms.
Yeah.
Men tend to just get really violent and try to eliminate the threat, like swing fists and scream and shout and kick and punch wall and door. This sounds so familiar to so many men listening right now, where a lot of women tend to emotionally withdraw, protect themselves, remove the vulnerability, walk away from the situation, run or freeze or cover up or whatever it might be. These are just like stereotypical, everybody calm down. These are stereotypical responses when men or women experience fear. I had conversations that I spoke about in the podcast last year about my own fear. And we all have fears. And I'm trying to figure out what are they? There's insecurities and fears in there. How do I express those? Sometimes my manager told me on the pitch, he was the first person to ever say this to me, because everyone talked to me like I'm a very physical player. And it was a compliment. And he said to me, sometimes, Dan, I see you being very petulant and getting angry. We don't need to get angry. And like being never like, I'm going to fucking put my fist through your face, but really overtly aggressive. Fear. I have some sort of fear about being judged less than if I don't like establish my dominance in this particular battle online. Fear-based.
But then the idea with this is, because Damien Brown talked about this as well, this is in you and needs to be expressed. Because if you don't express that, it could potentially, well, if it's going to be repressed or distracted, you could end up having really bad addictions or coping mechanisms, or it can express unconsciously.
Now, this is the interesting thing, right? Because based on what we're saying here, does the anger need to be expressed, or does the fear need to be regulated? Because the fear is okay. We all experience fear. In that third episode with Jamie, okay, let's look at why he did what he did. Complete theory here, right? He went to the car park. He confronted the girl. She pushed him on the ground and ridiculed him. He felt fear. He felt shame and embarrassment, which is fear. And he responded with anger, raw anger. And he went and he stabbed her. Excuse me. In the episode with the psychiatrist, when she challenged him and pushed back against him, because he was trying to establish a bit of dominance over her as a female. He was standing over her. He was being snide. He was calling her names. He was and he was trying to establish a dominance. She maintained a very professional and neutral response. Didn't respond to his fear. She flinched once, and then he reacted with anger. Because he was afraid. It wasn't working. He wasn't the dominant one. His insecurities were obvious. She was pressing on his fear. She was asking him, do you find yourself sexually attractive? And that was embarrassing and uncomfortable for him, and he didn't. Fear. And what did he do? He lost his fucking shit. He threw the chair. He screamed. He shouted. He roared at her. That's a fear response. So does he need a better way for an outlet for the anger? There's an argument there for men need to do physical things to burn off some of that excess energy. not be less angry, but there's fear. So do we need to understand?
Yeah, but
why
I
we
don't
feel
know,
fear?
because as you're talking about there, and as Damien were talking about, I think that idea of anger, like that is within you and has to be expressed. And I know you had Pat Divley on the podcast a few times. The king, warrior, lover, magician, the archetypes of the masculine energy. So that idea of that kind of warrior, you mentioned there about sport and that competitiveness and that idea of really, because I play ball on a Tuesday, 5-a-side, 6-a-side, and it's a really good way of expressing that kind of, you can call it fear or anger, but just that's something that's in me.
But that's an energy.
Okay.
Anger is an emotion, an expression, I believe, of fear. So
is it always though? Is anger? No,
in a lot of cases. Like, why does something make you angry?
Well, but that's fine. But the idea being that you can also, because I think it's unfair to say, because I think you are right. I think the majority of the time it probably is fear.
A lot of the time, I wouldn't say the majority.
Okay, a lot, fine.
Yeah.
But the idea that anger is a normal emotion to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's good times to be angry. So for example, people who aren't in their warrior, you would say, struggle to put boundaries in place.
Yeah.
Struggle to say no.
Yeah. So
that's a form of anger, we'll say, to certainly going like, I'm going to say no to you. That's being expressed honestly and openly.
So it's a healthy expression of an emotion. Yeah.
But that's not fear, is it? That's anger. That's a real.
So my theory is, right, I'm just developing this theory as we're talking here.
Right now.
But like anger is an emotion, fear is another emotion. But I think a lot of anger comes from fear in men because it's the only way they know how to express a certain emotion, which is just lose your shit. And I think the energy that, like, I won't say masculine energy, but that energy is another thing. So we need an outlet for the energy, because you have someone who's afraid and they express themselves through anger and they have a lot of this energy to burn off. That's dangerous.
I'll be able to see, that's what maybe I'm getting a bit confused here, because you're almost classing that energy as separate from the emotion, but I'd say it's the same.
It's all linked, right? Like, let me give an example to try and illustrate my point here, right? You have somebody who's just a sedated type of person. There's someone who is in poor shape. They play a lot of, I'm not trying to demonize video games, but they sit in their ass all day playing video games, smoking weed. They've no real get up and go. They've no energy. They don't train. They've none of that, like, They get angry. They're not going to go out and start swinging fists. They're just going to, they tend to like turn away from confrontation or just like try and undermine their character, whatever. You take that same person who has a lot of this like physical energy built up inside them, and maybe they are in a little bit better physical shape. So the energy piece is important there in terms of how it's expressed.
Yes. Okay.
So then you take somebody who has a really good hold on their emotions, right? They still experience the fear trigger. It could be somebody saying something, overstepping a boundary, making fun of them. So they still have the fear trigger, right? Same trigger. But their expression of anger is a little bit healthier. They take a second. They go, okay, this has triggered me. I feel anger. And the anger is based off whatever, probably a fear trigger, something that it's touched me deep inside. You don't just get angry. You get angry because you've attached some meaning to this thing that someone says. If you said something to me and I was a really secure person, I wouldn't give a shit. So it's not the words that make me angry. It's my insecurity. You've said something. My 3 fingers are pointing back at me. It's touched something deep inside me, an insecurity probably. I'm afraid. So my response is, fuck you.
Yeah.
What the fuck do you know? I have 2 choices. I can express myself and go, okay, that's upset me there, Brian. I'm going to establish a boundary. I really wish you wouldn't say things like that. I don't enjoy that. That's not nice. Or I get up on this table and I kick your teeth in. So there's
also other ways of expressing that as well.
Yeah. And that's a scale. So
yeah.
Spectrum 1, I am the calm monk.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with me, Brian. You've triggered me here, but it's okay because I'm compassionate as a human. And get on the desk and kick your teeth in. Most of us are somewhere on that spectrum. We're not kicking teeth in and we're not like calm and control. We're in the middle there somewhere. So can we, so the fear trigger there is all the same. 1, I've no get up and go, so I just sit and take it. I don't have that energy. I don't have the energy to express my anger in any way. I just feel like, oh, you must be right. And I go inside myself. And like, again, there's many varieties of this, but this is just 3 examples. 2 is, I'm calm and I'm okay, and then 3 is I completely lose my shit and I go up and I kick it. So again, sometimes on the football pitch that happens to me where for some reason I get triggered and I get really angry. I don't kick someone's teeth in, but I get overly physical and I throw my body in places and stuff like that. That's just and
it's unnecessary.
It's unnecessary. Yeah. So there's a fear relationship there. When I'm watching Jamie, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that it's in you as well. You just don't express it.
But that's the idea, though. I think with this thing, because go back to I think the whole start of this point of this conversation is the acknowledgement of those emotions.
We have to acknowledge it.
Exactly. Because they are in us and they are real and they're not going to necessarily go away.
No. And I think this is a bigger conversation. We can't just punish the behavior. We should punish the behavior. So Jamie did this horrible thing to this girl. He goes to prison.
Yeah.
100%.
That's right. Yeah.
Agreed. That's right. However, that's never, ever, ever going to change unless we can understand what is happening to him in that room with that psychiatrist. Why is he having this visceral reaction? Because Jill turned to me and said, is that inside all men? I said, absolutely. What you're seeing there is an expression of pure insecurity. and someone who does not know how to express their emotions. And he's 13, which is normal, but he has no idea how to express his emotions. And what he's getting from his phone is it's somebody else's fault, and his language around her is really derogatory about women.
Or even I'm less than because I don't have what all these people have.
So it's I'm less than, but it's her fault. He talks about the girl as
and that's the incel community. They are blaming the external. They're blaming somebody else for my poor emotions 100%. Or my life or whatever.
He takes this tactic with the girl, I can't remember her name, where he calls her flat-chested and tries to undermine her value, thinking it'll make it a bit easier for him to then get in with her. Like all these different tactics, it's all insecurity in him. And Jill couldn't really, like I'm trying to explain it here now, Jill couldn't really understand what I was saying. So you'd react like this. Like, no. I have been
the tools. That's the difference.
I had a dad who taught me how to express myself or regulate myself, consciously in some ways and unconsciously in other ways, because my dad has a huge temper as well, but in 99.9% of cases is really able to manage his emotions. And I modeled to myself off my dad. I have a temper, but in 99.9% of cases, not all cases, I'm able to regulate, probably less than that, but I'm able to regulate that anger response.
And there's also a level here of understanding yourself, because again, you would have struggled mentally, say in your 20s, as would have I. And now, you still struggle, obviously, but I'm just saying in our 30s, we understand ourselves more. So again, our triggers, our emotions, our values, our needs, and just go back to a teenager who's trying to find their identity. They've never experienced this. They're going through puberty. Again, everything you mentioned, from a family dynamic, a social dynamic, social media, like you can just see again, as you said, why people are like, well, there's no fucking answers. And that's the idea. There's so many nuances and things to this. It's like, we're getting it from all fucking angles.
100%.
And that's why it's scary.
That's why it's scary. And why it's really scary and uncomfortable for people to really acknowledge, I think, the whole underlying theme of this is, we said it before I came on, it's us. It's back to the circles I draw the entire time. If I want to look at adolescence and find somewhere to point the finger, I should do this. It's back on me.
By the way, people haven't watched this. You're pointing to yourself.
Sorry, sometimes I forget. Most people don't actually watch, they listen. I'm pointing to myself here. That's where it's on me to take the responsibility that I'm able to take in my specific situation to regulate myself, not to have words with my kid, or like, do I think phones should be allowed in school? No, I think that's adding extra chaos to the mix. And if we can find ways as a society to minimize the external exposure that a lot of the negative stuff online has on our children, I think we should do that. Do I think it's the problem? No, I think we are the problem. And I don't necessarily think there is a massive violence problem at the moment, but you can map this onto most issues, I believe, that we're having in society. If people were able to self-regulate a little bit more, there'd be less anger, there'd be less conflict, there'd be a little bit more compassion, because we would be more regulated.
Wasn't there the girl that you had on your podcast, the psychiatrist?
Rena O'Leary.
Yeah.
I've discussed this with her as well.
Yeah, but sorry, you were saying, and she was saying about the idea that they are committing these crimes often because they don't have the tools and they can't self-regulate.
Brilliant. Rena is brilliant. She explained to me, she called me on the podcast. I think we've spoken about this before, but Rena is a forensic psychologist. Long story short, she works almost exclusively with male offenders who have committed violent or sexual crimes against women. And she works with them after they've committed the crime. And she sits with them in a room, similar to what that psychologist did with Jamie. And she tries to understand the motivations for this. She tries to understand the where, the why. Is there a way to help these men? And that sounds really uncomfortable for people. But the fact is, unless we can understand the why, we're never going to be able to eliminate the problem, because it's deeper than these men just did this because they're toxic men. These men just did this because ABC. And I was like, well, everybody kind of knows the difference between wrong and right. And I was making a different point. She stopped me. She's like, no. Imagine a man who grew up in an underprivileged home with no father, and his role models were all gang members, and all he knew was violence, and violence was the way to progress in the world. Like, put yourself, you can't even do that because it's not real to you. But that's what a lot of these people come through. So it's not an excuse for the actions they take, but it's trying to understand how they could possibly get to a point where they murder someone else or rape a woman, or because they never learned the skills to manage their own feelings, emotions, expression of those emotions, combined with, in a lot of cases, they're rewarded for these behaviors on the streets or in gang culture, where the tougher and more aggressive and violent you are, the more you progress through She's like, there's so many nuances that we have to acknowledge.
And then even as you're talking there, the generalized, if you make that more generalized, you can see why then we go to alcohol, or we go to porn, or we go to any other
100%.
Addiction to get a way to regulate our emotions.
Because we don't have the skills.
I don't really feel great
emotions
here. If I do this thing, I don't have to feel it.
And these things are highly addictive, which is another layer of the problem. But we're reaching for them in the first place because we feel uncomfortable sitting with ourselves. So map this onto Jamie. No. He does not come from an underprivileged background where kids are going to go. He's a working class child from a white background, which again traditionally these issues don't exist necessarily at the scale that people are talking about in these. Again, this is according to William Costello, but map the regulation issue on, and you could see how that could be a potential option for a child like that. It wasn't an option. It was just an expression.
Yeah.
It was an insecurity. It was a reaction.
And a lot of it is unconscious.
And that's why me watching the dad and his reactions, that 60-second scene where he's watching his child get strip searched, and we're not watching the child, we're watching his face. Just the emotions to go through, his helplessness. I don't know what to do. I've no way to manage this. I just have to stand and quiver with rage, and then with fear, and then with upset, and I'm watching him going, Jesus Christ, that's me. Like, and small doses around my life, I don't know how to handle these situations. I get uncomfortable, so I try and soothe myself by doing something else. It's extremely unlikely I'm ever going to have a violent, rage-filled expression and hurt somebody, but it's in there if I don't manage myself properly, and I'm not very, very aware. It's in there, not highly likely, but think about how that impacts my relationship, my kids, society, how I speak to people. It's all of those things that I'm thinking about, not the chances that my sons are going to go and commit violent murder. And also, it's their experience of life. Are they going to go through life filled with this fear and self-doubt and anger and self-loathing and embarrassment because they don't know how to regulate? They don't have the skills and the tools. I cannot protect them from everything they're going to have access to. It's inevitable. They're going to have access to all this stuff, and probably more as we go on. But can I give them skills to manage how they feel as a response of how they interact with the internet or other people? I think that's my
as you're explaining there, that's the whole underlying reason. I did know it unconsciously, but consciously why I'm trying to leverage and use being a father to be better.
Yeah.
Because when I've made decisions that I've made over the last 5 years, if I didn't have a child, I don't think I would. And it's all to try to be better or teach them to be better. And again, go back to all of us as parents, whether we're acting in a way we want to or not, we all feel the exact same way. We all want to be better for our children. We all want to make sure that they have the tools. And that's why you said, really, this series really did make it. I mean, maybe that's why I was bawling crying. Am I doing enough? Am I really living in a way that I want to? Am I giving them the tools? And then, I kissed and hugged Sailor and Gigi a little bit tighter the following day.
Yeah. So let me try and bring this back out of the depths of it for a bit here, just to kind of bring it towards the end of the conversation. Do I think we all need to have this massive fear response as a reaction to this episode? No. Do I think like the world is in such a state where we're going to have this mass experience of loneliness? No, I definitely think there's a lot of trends that way. There's a lot of people reporting being lonely, a lot of people reporting struggling with mental health, with purpose, with identity. You work with a lot of them. I speak to a lot of them, so I'm going to cough here. But do I agree with any of the fear mongering around this? Absolutely not. Do I think there's going to be an absolute mad, violent rampage with young boys murdering young women? No, I don't think so. Do I think we have a problem with violence? Yeah, in certain communities, as the guys pointed out, and this is a huge issue in the UK at the moment with all the gangs, the grooming gangs and stuff like that.
And also knife crime in general.
There's a lot of real issues. Do I think this is one of the real issues in terms of young boys committing incel violence against young girls? Absolutely not. Do I think we need to have this huge guilty response, like myself and yourself and other people after this conversation, to, we're not doing enough? No, absolutely not. Why do I think this is so effective? Because it asks the questions. And I think the only way this works going forward is there's no answers necessarily. I think it's constant dialogue. It's like this conversation for me has been really helpful. We had a conversation with James when we went for a walk the other day about this. It's really helpful just to keep going. Are there areas where maybe I can develop more awareness? Can I regulate myself a little bit more? No, I shouldn't self-flagellate and be guilty or ashamed that I'm not doing enough for my child. But there's probably areas I could be better for myself and my family and my friends. There's probably areas I could lead this a little bit more. Do I need to be terrified? No, but I can do a little bit more. That's my first thought.
But I think also as well, it's why it's got the reaction it's got, I think, from everyone worldwide, is society. I think we're looking at society going, well, look, are we actually focused on the right things? And the right things for me really are relationships, family, connection, like I said, regulation, emotions, because modern life is, fucking go and chase and succeed, and is there less community, less time. I'm pretty sure a lot of people can relate to the dad being like, I've done the best. I'm pretty sure what the dad would say to me, because I work with men on a lot of this stuff, I don't have time.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
Where am I going to get time? And I always say, well, we don't have to create more time. Can we create more space? As in, like, but this is the idea. It has to have a level of awareness going, yeah, okay, can we start the conversation at least? You don't have to make any kind of changes, but the idea being, how am I living? Where am I at right now? What do I want over the next 10, 20, 30 years? And the big thing for me is genuinely, I think I said it on the podcast, I don't know who I said it on with, but like, Joe Parrish, actually, I mentioned the idea that like, a big decision I made professionally was so I'm better and more present and more connected with Sailor. So in 25, 30 years' time at her wedding, when I do the speech as her father, there's a connection there. From the everyday, from the week to week, from the month to month. Like I'm really, really clear that I want that. Like I really, really want that. And I have it to some degree now, but Jesus, she's fucking 5. I got another 20, 30 years to go. So am I living that way? Am I creating that space for me? Am I like learning these tools more and more? Am I having conversations like this to keep building that awareness and living more in alignment with how I want to live? I just think that's really, really important.
Just on that point you made there, and not, again, not to fearmonger here, but even though she's just 5, like these are the years 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because they get to 9, 10, 11. That's when external influence starts to play a little bit more. I can even see it in Zoe now. She's 7. Like what her friends say and do and what she sees on TV has more of an influence on what she's absorbing.
Yeah.
So like it's not that we have to be perfect, but I think wherever you are right now is probably a good time to start learning about yourself and how to regulate and generate a little bit more self-awareness. And you're right, like most people don't have the time for this, which is absolutely fair, but it's not about that. It's if something you want to do is change possible negative outcomes for your children, my personal belief is, like you've just said there, it's my responsibility, not necessarily to go out and earn loads of money and build a big business and all these kind of things, because that's my drive as a father. That's what I want to do. But to a certain degree, that's also an abdication of a certain level of responsibility there, because really at the moment what they need from me is presence, love, regulation, understanding, and they need to see me working on the things that I want, that they don't know this consciously, but that is going to benefit them in the future. They need to feel me if I have a problem or get angry, that I deal with it really well and I calm, and how I interact with Jill and how I interact with myself, and like what am I doing and how am I doing and what's my energy like. That's what they're kind of feeling and picking up on. And I think in this phase, my kids are 7, 3 and 1. I think this is the phase where they're going to absorb most of that, because by the time they're 11, 12, 13, they're Jamies, like they're getting that from somewhere else. And again, not necessarily that those messages are going to cause them to do anything crazy, but I can have less of an impact then. Still a huge impact. But by the time they get there, I'd like to think that they have such a good bond with me and with Jill that they can trust. And like I fall down at this all the time.
Yeah.
But again, back to my original point, why do I think this was a compelling piece of TV? Because it brought that up for me again. And when I have conversations with you about your kids, it brings it up for me again. And when I see certain things happen online, it brings it up for me. And I just think the conversation is what's important.
Well, even that, because Evan, you're saying there, what I it just keeps popping up for me now is the disconnect with self.
Yeah.
So I think we can all feel that, because even what I would have got again with Stephen Graham's character when he said, I'm just really busy. I remember with work just being so busy and being successful externally, doing all really good work, doing work I really enjoyed, but actually having a disconnect with myself. As in, I'd go home and I wouldn't be fucking there. I'm on my phone, there's work to do, or I got to fucking, and it's like, again, for me, I know how I feel in that moment, which is I often don't feel. I'm in my fucking head.
Living here up
yeah.
and down.
And again, as you said there, that's what the kids are feeling. They're feeling that energy. They're feeling that in the household. And the opposite of that is, again, for me, when I'm connected, there's a bit more play, there's a bit more presence, there's a bit more connection just with myself. And as a result, there's more connection with my family. And again, I go back to Jordan Peterson. I always talk about this, the idea of divorce. It's every day opening the door and giving your wife a kiss or not. And same with this. It's the everyday little things of like presence or not presence. And again, we don't get it right, far from it every single day. But can we just lean a bit more to go, oh, Jesus, look, there's a bit more presence here today or this week. That's cool. And if you keep leaning into that, there's a potential for more presence and more connection every day.
Yeah. And on that point, that's why I don't think that using this to inform policy at a government level and showing it in schools, I don't think that's the right thing.
No. But I really don't think this was for children.
No.
Or teenagers to get. Because again, it's not what I think it was all about, that idea of self. And you can't teach teenagers who are 11, 12, 13, 14 these kind of tools or have these kind of conversations. Because Jesus, man, if you had a conversation with me as a teenager around this, I would think you were batshit crazy. I'd be like, what are you talking about?
Look what we just said. We're in our 30s. There's people in their 30s, 40s and 50s looking at this and completely misinterpreting it. We're trying to figure our way through it. We are literally parents in our mid-30s and we're trying to like get our heads around it. Show this to a kid. Like, what are they going to go? Oh, don't get knives.
Yeah.
Don't go on internet bad. No. That's ridiculous.
What is the actual? What are they trying to get from the politics? What's the whole?
But it's like anything. I think it has caused a stir. It has had an emotional reaction. Therefore, they're responding to it and they're deciding, oh my God,
we've got to do something.
We have to do something to prevent this. Now, as William Costello says, they're not basing this on any research. I'm not the guy who says everything has to be research-based because stuff moves so fast now. You kind of got to figure stuff out outside the research as well.
A bit of both, kind of like.
Research needs to inform this for sure, but we also need to have a bit of common sense. But like, that's what I feel is lacking with a lot of these conversations. But as far as I understand it, they want to show this in all schools as part of the curriculum so we understand the dangers as children and as teachers and as parents of the incel community and Andrew Tate. That's what I'm getting. It's a really, really reductionist message that has completely missed the point. I think the show, the producers and writers of the show are just getting stepped along in this. Like I think I don't understand what the conversations they're having. Are they pushing back and saying, no, this isn't the point? Are they saying, this is amazing, we're going to get this into all the schools? Like I said, did they even intend for me and you to take this from the show? I don't fucking know. I'd need to talk to Stephen Graham. So there's a lot of nuance.
By the way, this is the joys of art, isn't it? About how you can express genuinely your open, honest, authentic work. And people go, well, I got this.
One way or another, this was an expression from Stephen and the entire team who put this together, from everybody, the guys who shot it, who recorded it, who scripted it, who wrote it, who acted it. It was an expression of these people. And we got this message, which I think is incredible.
Yeah, it's class.
And someone else will argue that wasn't the message at all.
Yeah.
No problem. Fine. Whatever. But should this inform policy? No, I think it's so simple-minded. And it's people, we will do something to protect your children. It's a play for fucking votes. We will protect your kids. Get this into the schools. Make sure they see it. I think it completely.
Here, I'm a bit of a rush here, sir. So are we going to wrap this podcast up?
Yeah, we're going to wrap this podcast up. You're not that much of a rush. You've got another 5 minutes.
Yeah, I do 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm wrapping it up anyway. So, do I think it should inform policy? No, just to address the Andrew Tate thing, because I said we would. I don't know if people actually know this, but like the incel community and Andrew Tate online could not be more polar fucking opposites. If people don't understand what the incel community is, it's, and again, not an expert here, but a community of people who essentially feel like that incel stands for involuntary celibate. So they feel like they cannot have mating success because of external factors, and that they are less than because women's standards are too high, or fucking the Chad alphas have too much control, or whatever the fuck it might be. So they're blaming other people. And Tate's entire message, again, and I don't agree with either of these camps of people, but Tate's entire message is stop being a little pussy and go out and get the shit done, man.
Yeah.
Be an animal, go train, become an animal. And like they literally hate each other online.
And it's similar as well with Jordan Peterson. He often gets the incel community or being told
king of the incels. Olivia, what's her face said he was
but
king
it's actually
of the
quite the
incels.
opposite, as in take responsibility for yourself.
Holy shit.
Don't be the victim.
Polar opposite. Don't be a fucking victim. Clean your room is the most basic.
But you can see, because the incel community, I don't know how new it is or kind of what the crack is with it, but like if I was a young lad and lost of my identity and who I am as a man, you could see how you could get lost in it.
There's a line in that show which is so funny. The cop says it, every 13-year-old boy is an incel. Every fucking 13-year-old boy is trying to go out and have mating success or get with girls, and it's a like that's the stage of life that you're in.
Yeah.
The problem we have is messaging online that says this means something else.
Yeah.
It means it's their fault, or women are bitches, or it's So like again, anyone who that narrative is completely missing the point. Starmer said it as well. It's like Tate and all that incel stuff. It's like, they are two fucking different things. Like they're not the same thing whatsoever. So yeah, that point for me, you can forget about that one. It's not a particular person online to blame for this. Again, not a fan of Tate, not a fan of the incel community at all.
But I think that's the idea with this series. Again, there's no real simple answer. There is no one answer. Like I said, it opens up a load of questions. I think that's why a lot of people didn't like it. They're like, well, what the hell was that? We didn't finish it this way, or we never got an answer for this.
You didn't tell us where you hit the knife and us.
Yeah.
Not the point. Not for me and you, not the point.
No, but I think that was why it's scary.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, there's no answer.
100%. There's no answer. It's not clear cut. It's not black and white, but me and you cried, and let's basically the podcast. But you're in some sort of rush this morning, so when you're going to ruin the end of the podcast. But no,
I'm not. What's the takeaway then from this?
Takeaway from this is, I think dialogue around subject matter like this is important. Constantly open dialogue, and ultimately, like I say in most of these podcasts, it comes back to us. It comes back to our own ability to generate self-awareness, build a bit of space, and regulate ourselves. And I think by doing that, we can help a lot of the downstream issues that we're having now. I think there's a real-time problem in terms of social media, access to content that we can have a look at. I would be a fan of not having phones in schools, but children are going to have access to this content.
And potentially being, Australia, it had to be 16, I think. Now
it had to be 16. But my other question is, when you remove the phone, which is their form of self-regulation, quote-unquote here, by the way, what are you going to replace it with? How are we going to help educate kids more? How are we
Well, to be fair, there is at least good more understanding of mental health and these things, isn't there? Yeah.
Mainstream, fucking tiny. Now, I don't know how this works. Again, I don't have the answers. Neither does the show.
I think I go back to it. I think for me, and you were getting at, though, it does start from the home.
It starts from the
If
home.
you're going to advocate all of this to somebody else, well, you're at least, and you're not taking that responsibility of your small little circle. And that starts with yourself.
And then that opens up more questions for us, which I won't go into now, but like if people in the home who've never learned how to regulate, people in the home who have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, people in the home who have sick children, people in the home who never had this education, as Renox said to me, people in the home who never had access to this information that we do, how do we support those people? So like there's so many questions here, and I think the easy answer is shout in all the schools, we've done our bit, wash our hands, off we go. Or Andrew Tate's the problem, we need to silence voices like him. Jordan Peterson's king of the incels, we need to silence voices like him. It's fucking too easy, simplified bullshit, handing it off to somebody else. So my whole response to this is why I got upset and uncomfortable. I have more of a role to play here for me and my family and my friends. I meet people like yourself and other people I have conversations with, and I find the sentiment is similar in a lot of people. So let's keep having the conversation. I think it's really important.
I think for me, my takeaway from the series would be whether you kind of enjoyed it or not. I think the fact that it got such a reaction globally does kind of tell you something. Whatever like our beliefs are around it or what it was, there's definitely something underlying here in terms of like, yeah, there's real deep questions that maybe we're not looking at or we're afraid to look at or potentially we should be looking at. So I think even this conversation, because we brought it down different avenues.
Yeah.
And again, we were exploring a lot of topics there that maybe we didn't even kind of know about. And I think this is the idea, even for like what I'm doing now with clients, because I've only kind of got clear on, there's no real result. So from any of this, it's actually a way of living, you know, and that's why it's a bit uncomfortable, because it's not that you do this thing and it's done. It's like, oh no, we're going to do this thing, potentially get a result, and there's more progress, or there's tomorrow. It's just constant work. And I don't know, it definitely stirred up emotion in me, and this conversation would be great.
A compelling conversation about a compelling series.
Lovely,
a compelling conversation about a compelling series. Brian, thank you so much for your time, as always. Thank you, my friends, for listening, and I'm sure we'll see you very soon.
Thank you.
Peace.